Pandemics, recessions, housing markets? Oh my. Hey everybody, welcome to Minneapolis Living. I'm Nick Sundahl with Acta Homes of Keller Williams Classic Realty Northwest. Before I get into what you need to know about this pandemic, the effect on the economy, and more importantly, the effect on the housing market, I would love it if you hit the subscribe button and then ring the bell so you're alerted every time I upload a new video on Tuesdays and Fridays. Let me just say this, the recession, and there will be one, it's just a matter of time, the next one will be significantly different than the last one we had, the Great Recession of 08, 09, 2010. And there are some major factors when thinking about this. The previous one, the last one, which obviously gives us some recency bias, was caused by an unstable housing market. And that was mostly built upon subprime loans being handed out to unqualified buyers, or buyers that shouldn't have been qualified. Unfortunately, there was a lot of unscrupulous players in this game, from the banks all the way down to the people taking out the loans. They were doing some things that were just not financially responsible, in which case gave us essentially a house of cards, for lack of a better phrase. When people were buying these homes at very low interest rates, specifically on adjustable rates, they had then balloon payments that they could not make. Our economy was going great and people had jobs, but they couldn't make those big payments because they didn't actually have that kind of income. And when they stopped making the payments, those houses went into foreclosure. And of course, there were way more of those than there were stable homes on the market, and it drove all the valuation out of the market. Fast forward to 2011, 2012, when lending regulations began to loosen just a touch, to the point where people could now afford a home, one, because of the depressed values, but two, they could get into a home for only maybe 5% down or 10% down as opposed to 20%. Now, when that starts happening and you have verified buyers in terms of verified income and credit levels, and say what you will about the credit bureaus, but they painted a pretty decent picture when it comes to the ability of a buyer. But that buyer from say 2010 or 2011 all the way till now has been a premium buyer. These are people that have had exceptional credit, they've had nice down payments, so they've got equity in the home, and they've had the ability over the last 10 years to refinance into even better interest rates. So you went from essentially the worst group of buyers from say 2001 to 2007 to now the greatest group of buyers in terms of their ability to make their payments and keep their home values up. So this recession isn't going to be the same in terms of a housing market crashing and causing a recession. It will be a recession that happens, and then that may have an effect on housing. And speaking of that unprecedented growth that's happened over the last 10 years, we're looking at home values that have practically doubled, if not more, from say 2012 to 2020. And when you have that much equity in a home, even if the market were to take a downturn and a dip, you still are not underwater on the property. So we've got historic amounts of equity built in the home. Now, assuming you haven't leveraged yourself in terms of home equity loans and taking out more credit, that's a different argument. But in terms of just the property itself, there's no reason that you should be underwater on your property, especially if you purchased within the last 10 years. Now, moving on to interest rates. Right now, there's big news coming from the Fed and how they've dropped their rate, in which that's not something to look at. Mostly because mortgage lenders anticipate that kind of stuff, and they set their rates based on more of the bond market and even to a greater extent supply and demand. A handful of weeks ago, rates dropped to historic lows, like the lowest they've ever been. And then of course they had a slew of people asking for refinances and or new purchase. and they had to raise rates back up to handle the inventory that they were taking in. So supply demand works a little bit more with the product that you're purchasing from the loan than it does from the Fed and their effective rate cuts. And the last thing I want to discuss about the recession or upcoming recession and how it won't be the same as 2008 and why the housing market might not actually take as big of a hit as some people are willing to exclaim out there is the rental market. Rents are continuing to climb just like home prices. And so if you compare a growing rent to a static home price when you purchase and then leaving that mortgage payment the same for the next 30 years, home buying and home ownership still remain very attractive. So it leads me to the biggest question: should I purchase during a recession? And make no mistake, the recession is coming because this pandemic has probably accelerated it. Well, if you can afford the monthly mortgage payment along with all the other costs that goes into owning a home, such as utilities and repairs and maintenance, and you can do that for 7+ years, then today is a great time to buy. Not only do we have historically low interest rates, which gives you great purchasing power, but if you plan on living in that home for 10+ years, you're going to be able to weather any market in any downturn. Do you have any additional questions when it comes to buying and selling during a recession? I would love to speak with you. You can comment below, or you can reach out. Call, text, email, contact me on social media, but I would love to hear from you. This is Minneapolis Living. I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.